new true crime podcast you need to hear to believe.
I need police right now. I've just started broken into my house.
2 men dead at the hands of a teenager and almost every moment recorded.
Please, don't move.
Put the knife down.
I was just trying to help her.
What happened at Alba Beach was as horrific as it was baffling.
There's so much contradiction. We should know more than we know.
I'm Adam Hegarty. I'll take you inside one of the country's most confusing investigations in this exclusive 60 Minutes podcast.
Ambulance, police, inquest, a domino effect of failures. It's killing us.
I'm not a police officer anymore. I can speak more freely.
Alba Beach, Death at the Door, wherever you get your podcasts.
The Australian Financial Review.
Hello, I'm James Thomson, Senior Chanticleer columnist at the AFR. Welcome to our weekly news breakdown of all things business, finance and markets. With me today, as always, is my Chanticleer colleague, the winner of the Under-7s Encouragement Award at the Croydon Soccer Club. It's Anthony Macdonald. How are you, Anthony?
I could use an encouragement award at this time here, James.
Fair enough. This week, we take a look at how the data centre boom in Australia just changed. We take you inside our Business Person of the Year awards, and we ask a big question. Is Australia a giant Ponzi scheme?
Okay, James, we're not letting that one rest.
Yeah, fair enough.
You posed this question after chatting with one of the country's most thoughtful fund managers, Schroders Head of Australian Equities, Martin Conlon. This sounds right up your bearish alley, Australia being a great Ponzi. That actually sounds a bit nuts. What was Martin getting at, and do you think he's right?
Well, yes, it does sound a bit nuts. I think he's being deliberately provocative, and fair enough. But the idea is a Ponzi scheme is something that was first run by an American bloke called Charles Ponzi back in the 1920s. And the idea was basically that he'd found this wonderful investment scheme where everyone's returns went up and up and up. But what he was doing was using the returns from the new investors to pay the old investors. And as soon as there were no new investors, as soon as the flood of new money dried up, the whole thing fell apart. And what Martin Conlon's trying to say here is that we have, I guess, a couple of elements of this. One is that we've got very high house prices, which keep going up and up and up. But why do they keep going up and up and up? Because demand keeps going up and up and up, because we have a very high immigration intake, which keeps adding to the population, keeps adding to the demand. And what Conlon's point is that if we were to pull the plug and reduce immigration, that could reduce demand for property, and we might see these property prices unwind. So the Ponzi element here is that we keep sort of filling the bucket with new potential house buyers. It keeps pushing prices of property up. They're now at an unsustainable level. The economy looks like it's growing. It looks like it's strong, but it's built on this very shaky foundation. It's an emotive way of describing it, calling it a Ponzi scheme, but I think people could broadly get their heads around what Conlon's saying here, that there is an element here with our house prices, which we talk a lot about on the podcast, that feels unsustainable. And at some point, this is going to unwind and we're going to be left with a bit of a mess. And the example of that, which Conlon points out, is China. They pumped up property prices and pumped them up and pumped them up and pumped them up. And now they are in what appears to be the middle of a very, very, very long multi-year property crash, which is casting a really big shadow over their economy. So, yes, it is emotive, but does it sound completely nuts to you, Anthony?
Not completely nuts, James. I mean, I quite like the way that Martin thinks, and the rest of the Schroders team, for that matters. You know, they're really banging on about disequilibrium. You know, all this stuff that's just a bit out of whack. You know, we've got the house prices, but, you know, I think he also went into gold, didn't he? And expensive defensive like Wesfarmers. Yeah, things are just a bit out of whack. And sometimes it's good to have someone like Martin, who's been in the market for decades, just say, hang on a sec, let's just think about what's actually going on.
Yeah, I think that's the really good point he does make, is that investors particularly have this tendency to buy a stock expecting that the conditions that exist now will exist forever.
Yeah.
And so his point is you got to test that a bit. Do you think when you buy a bank stock at a really expensive valuation that housing boom can go on forever and ever and ever? If you don't, then are you prepared to pay the high valuations that banks are priced at? Do you think that all this talk about the West breaking China's monopoly or control of rare earths, do you think that their efforts to break that monopoly are really going to work? If you don't, then it's probably not worth jumping on the rare earths mania. So I think that's what he encourages us to think about. Think about, where do you think things will settle, and that's the basis on which you should be buying shares. So, Anthony, we always need a few contrarians in our world just to make us test our assumptions, right?
Any sort of thought-provoking commentary like that out of a fund manager like Martin, I say bring it on. It's just great to hear it.
Well, let's jump into something a bit more hopeful. And this week, the computer billionaire Michael Dell and his wife Susan announced a rather extraordinary philanthropic gesture. They announced they would donate $6.25 billion US to kids in America, not by handing out checks, but by seeding investment accounts with $250 for 25 million children aged 10 and under. Now, there is a bit of a political flavour to this because the money will be routed through Trump-branded investment accounts. Trump's always in there somewhere. But Anthony, how will this whole scheme work, and what do you reckon? Is it a good idea?
I think it's a great idea, James. I mean, we are so lucky to be born into a country, a society, at a time where you get a bank account early. If someone gives you a few bob for your birthday, you can put it in your bank account, see how that grows slowly without you watching the compounding returns. We're so fortunate. It's easy to take it for granted. There's a lot of people out there that don't have it. So these Trump accounts, it's very Donald Trump. He says for all children born from January this year until the end of December 2028. So that's basically his presidency.
Yeah.
We'll get $1,000 initial deposit into one of these accounts. That account will basically be invested into an S&P 500 ETF. So it's money that goes into the US capital markets, US economy, basically. So it helps the country too. And you can add up to $5,000 in those accounts, and anyone under 18 can open a Trump account. But on top of this, kids that live in postcodes where the median household income's less than $150K a year, Michael Dell and his wife Susan are giving them $250 in a Trump account. Now, these Trump accounts, you know, the details are a little bit murky. It could trigger tax problems, but they're talking about you might be able to use them for things like higher education or to buy your first home and not run into those tax problems. But that's a problem for the future when Trump's long gone. And if these things survive, I don't think they'll be known as the Trump accounts anymore. But I think it's great. I think if you're going to give money away, give it to the people that need it. You know, let's help set up the next generation, and particularly those who may be from less well-off areas, who maybe wouldn't otherwise get to 18 years of age and have a penny to their name. There's plenty of people out there throwing rocks at it, James, but I think directionally it's not bad. What do you reckon?
Look, Anthony, what this reminds me of is how lucky we are to have a super scheme here. And I did note, as Donald Trump was talking about this, he did mention he had under consideration introducing an Australian-style super scheme. But, I mean, doing it for kids, getting kids exposed to the market and saving from a young age sounds like a pretty good idea. I mean, financial literacy is something that builds over your life, and the earlier the better, I guess. It got me wondering, though, Anthony, do we do enough to teach our kids about saving and investment? When you and I were growing up, of course, the Commonwealth Bank had the Dolomites account program in all schools. Now, that was booted out of schools around the time of the Royal Commission. CBA was accused of, I don't know, almost poisoning young minds. There are a lot of pocket money apps and similar types of things that parents are using to teach their kids about financial literacy. But do we throw the baby out with the bathwater there? I mean, it doesn't have to be a CBA scheme, but there was something about that savings scheme that sort of was appealing, right?
100%, James. I think the Dolomite scheme is fantastic. That's how I got my first bank account. And I'd say a lot of people of my sort of age would have been similar. In terms of financial literacy, I'm not sure there's much more important a thing a parent can do than open a bank account for their child and just show them the value of storing some money there for when you actually need it.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, Anthony, let's move to our first big topic of the week. And it's been a massive week for artificial intelligence in Australia. The big spending giant of the sector, that's OpenAI, announced it will become the major customer for a new $7 billion data centre development in Sydney at Eastern Creek. And on Friday, it had a bunch of Australia's biggest companies and government ministers patting it on the back at a launch of what they're calling OpenAI for Australia. Now, Commonwealth Bank was there, Wesfarmers was there, Coles was there, really big rollout. and as we say, a couple of ministers. Everyone wants a piece of this. Anthony, this came only 3 days after the government finally launched its national AI plan, something it had been promising for months. And ironically, it came a few days after you found some solid proof that we don't even have the necessary ingredients for the data center build-out, which is what we need if we're to build out the infrastructure that OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Anthropic, and all of those types of players need to be able to sell their wares to Commonwealth Bank and Wesfarmers and Coles and everyday people like you and me. There's a lot going on here, Anthony, and this one crosses politics, business and markets. Can you just take us back to where this started with AirTrunk, which is also trying to build a data centre out at Eastern Creek in Sydney? I used to know that as the home of motorsport in Australia, but apparently it's going to be the data centre capital of the country. What's going on with AirTrunk's big plan?
Such a red hot topic, James. And this week we got a bit of everything. But AirTrunk couldn't get the power it needs for this big new data center because the market operator doesn't think the power is there in the volume and the reliability not to potentially throw out the rest of the market.
Yeah.
So AirTrunk's building a 400 megawatt data center. Now that's a huge data center. You know, it's like 10 times bigger than the biggest data center that would have been built, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's a big one, right? And that means it needs 400 megawatts of power to power it at any given moment, or for them, every given moment, right? It needs the power constantly going in there. So to apply for 400 megawatts, it got allocated 300 megawatts of firm power, so 3/4 of what it asked for, plus 100 megawatts of what they're calling flexible power. Now, that flexible power would be available to AirTrunk whenever the grid could handle it, which, is probably 99 days out of 100, right? It would basically be there except for when the grid's in some sort of state of emergency, when we're in a wind drought and a sun drought and a coal-fired power generator go out at the same time. Problem is, though, that's not good enough for AirTrunk, right? It needs 400 megawatts all the time, every day, if it's going to sell contracts to all the customers who are going to need this data center if it wants to make the most of its capacity. So he has to come up with a workaround, and that's probably going to mean put a big battery on the site so it can suck power out of the grid and just store it when the operator says, no, you can't have that extra 100 megawatts. Now, James, the reason I'm interested, though, is that as far as the data center people sort of understand, this is the first big knockback on a project getting built. Data centers need a handful of things, but the two they need from the rest of us really is power and water. All the data centers we have at the moment are powered straight off the grid.
Yep.
But this one shows us the next batch, the big ones that are coming, they're going to have to sort out at least some of their own power. AirTrunk's been around for less than a decade, and it's always done big data centers, what were regarded as big data centers. But its first one that opened here in Sydney, it was 20 megawatts when it opened, with a plan to get to 80, I think, right? This thing's supposed to be 400, 5 times the plan of the first one, in less than a decade. So it just shows you this whole data usage, data storage, it's all going a bit ballistic.
Anthony, just to think about this OpenAI data center, the AirTrunk one you've just mentioned that hasn't been able to get all its power is 400 megawatts.
Yep.
This new one that OpenAI and NextDC are talking about developing is 650 megawatts, so it's bigger still.
Bigger again, yep.
Do we have an idea of how they're going to power that yet?
You know what, James? This is funny. I've asked Craig Scroggie at NextDC about this a few times, including on stage at the Energy Summit a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And he reckons he's got the solutions, but we're still not sure what they are, right? And you won't see anything in black and white ink on the ASX released to investors what the solutions are. Now, I'm sure he's very astutely picked this site, and I'm sure he's done it knowing that he's got certain power allocations and all that sort of stuff. But that is such a big data center that surely there's going to be a battery involved there. There might be a gas-fired peaking plant. They are going to have to come up with something because the market just doesn't have that excess capacity. It doesn't matter whether you're NextDC, AirTrunk, OpenAI, ChatGPT, James Thomson data centers, whatever. The market just doesn't have it.
Yeah. I'm picturing a lot of hamsters on a lot of wheels somewhere. Now, Anthony, so power's an obvious challenge, and we're clearly not close to sorting it. In fact, your report just raised so many questions for me about some of the choices we might have to make as we also try and do everything we're doing in the energy transition and build lots of new houses that are going to need power. But let's just come back to OpenAI for Australia, which sounds very cool. What is it, and why is it so important?
It's a fantastic bit of branding, James. This could be straight out of the Gruen transfer. A bunch of advertising creatives sitting around saying, how do we make AI look good? How do we make it look like it's for the country? I think you have to be a true believer to believe that OpenAI is for Australia. I mean, do we seriously think that OpenAI, the world's most valuable startup, which munches up our content whenever it can and churns it out as its own, is for Australia.
Yeah.
How much tax is it paid ever, in Australia or anywhere? Yeah, I'm not sure it's for Australia, but what they're doing here, this is pitched as building in Australia's sovereign AI capability. And if we're going to capitalize on AI, we need to have the infrastructure needed to do it in Australia. And that's what this sovereign capability is. Now, traditionally, governments build sovereign capability,
Yes.
right? But this one is a big global arms race. We're at the bottom of the world. There is 0 point trying to build an Australian ChatGPT. It just wouldn't work without American chips anyway. So if we're going to be relying on them for the chips, we may as well just import OpenAI and its ChatGPT, right? OpenAI is a big player out there. It's talking about underwriting this big NextDC data development. Details, James, are really light on, so light on. Supposedly a game-changing deal that can be summarized in 79 words. Yeah. That's long enough for one text message in the old days without rolling into a second. Trump could have almost tweeted it in one tweet. Yes. The gist of it, though, and there was a good story in the paper this morning by Paul Smith. OpenAI is going to anchor this data center, which is a big, big, big one, bigger than air trunks, for its Australian business. We have to assume companies like CBA, Wesfarmers and Coles, like why else would they turn up to the announcement? We have to assume it's for clients like them. They may end up using ChatGPT type software platforms in their business. Now, these guys in the government, they want this to be hosted in Australia. That's the sovereign bit. It's good for latency. It's a bit of Team Australia. But mate, no bones about it, James. The government's also behind this. This is red hot in this world. If you want to talk about the US and China fighting, what do you think they're talking about, right? It's AI, it's military power.
Yep.
And if you boil it all down, it's sort of emerged as chips versus rare earths. One has the chips, that's the US. The other is the rare earths processing, that's China. And then trade deals around soybeans and that's all just, that's just a cover, I think, for what's really going on. But also, both of them have their own AI ecosystems, for want of a better word, call it ChatGPT versus DeepSeek.
Yep.
Donald Trump calls this an AI arms race. He's trying to help the OpenAIs and that of the world. And deals like this, that's Australia choosing the US over China.
True.
Right, for AI infrastructure, while also trying to retain some sovereignty because the data center is located 30 kilometres away from where I'm sitting here,
Yes.
James. So, there's a lot going on here. Matt Common at CBA has been telling us about this AI sort of race for probably 18 months now. Craig Scroggie at NextDC has been talking about it for 2 years or 3 years, the fourth industrial revolution, all that sort of stuff. It's finally coming together, and it's really big in the government's world. The other thing that's fascinating, James, is while it's been a big week for OpenAI in Australia, the CEO, Sam Altman's back in the US issuing a code red to his staff. What's prompted that?
Well, OpenAI is the world's biggest startup, but it's also the startup that's going to lose the most money in history.
Yeah.
The numbers here are staggering. Deutsche Bank ran them on Thursday night. They're projected to make $345 billion in revenue. That's their projection.
Yeah.
That's US dollars between now and 2029. Sounds all right.
Yeah.
Except their costs are $488 billion. So there's $143 odd billion cash burn there. That's US dollars. That's a loss. And then on top of that, that's not even including this $1.4 trillion of spending promises that OpenAI has been making around the world, including little old Australia on Friday. So the numbers here are staggering. This company is so far away from making any money, it's not funny. And what Sam Altman's now worried about is that all these competitors are starting to catch up. They're starting to take a bit of ground off OpenAI. So that's Google and Anthropic, particularly Google, which has just released a new version of its Gemini large language model and got rave reviews, seems to be taking a bit of market share away. So he's concerned, it's one thing to fly in and fly out of every country and say, we're here. Yes, well, of course we'll sign up to your data center. Yes, of course we'll do this. Yes, of course we'll do that. But all those things cost money. And OpenAI is spending like not just a drunken sailor, it's spending like the whole Navy has been out on the terps for, a week.
Yeah.
So the economics here matter. They always matter. And I think that's what Sam Altman's worried about.
Well put, James. I'm just imagining the whole Navy getting on the terps. Like I said, there's so much going on in Australia, the US, China, and a lot of it's come to the fore this week. What's the big takeaway, do you think, from all of this? What's it telling us about AI and about the AI boom?
I've been thinking about this. It's ChatGPT's third birthday, right? November 30, ChatGPT was launched back in 2022. Quiet launch. And by about January the following year, 2023, everyone was talking about this thing and experimenting and sending around pictures of, guinea pigs that look like their uncle or whatever it was. What we've got now, though, is this really interesting twilight zone. We are throwing trillions of dollars of capital at data centers. We've obviously invested trillions of dollars in AI-related stocks, which have had a magnificent run for the last 3 years and boosted all our retirement savings and our investment portfolios. That's all good. It's really interesting to me that this is still 3 years in, built on anticipation rather than reality. We're still waiting for the AI productivity boom to show up in the official economic data. We're still, I think, waiting for AI to move from a personal productivity tool, saves me a bit of time when I do this task at work or at home, to an enterprise-wide tool. We're seeing experimentation in companies rather than widespread adoption. Why hasn't it gripped? Because we're waiting for the models to get better. We're told by the tech guys, this is all going to work out. Keep spending your money, keep buying the tools. The models will get better over time. And the big productivity gains, the big profit gains, the big changes to the workforce, they will come. They will come. So I think we're sort of waiting for all that to happen. But meanwhile, it's amazing how sort of the world's been transformed by this. Yes, lots of users for OpenAI, 800 million users, incredible.
That's a lot.
Incredible numbers of adoption. But I think the anticipation, you can see it in all sorts of places. You can definitely see it in capital markets. They're already changed. You can see it in education, the way schools and students think about how AI might change the workforce. You can see it in the conversations that you have around the barbecue about how AI might change jobs over the next few decades. But we're still waiting. We're waiting for the models to get better. So it's fascinating to me that we're sort of doing everything in anticipation that this will work out with no one really knows. OpenAI comes to Australia, declares OpenAI for the country, and ministers and the biggest CEOs in the place show up. They can't not show up. They've got to be in the race, even if they don't know where that goes. So we're all in on something that we don't know where it's going to go. What do you reckon?
I'd say Rome wasn't built in a day. It's only been a couple of years.
Northeastern Creek.
I think you've at least got to approach these things with some enthusiasm. And maybe that's what Australia is lacking a little bit. There could be great potential here.
Yeah.
Right? It really could help in terms of doing a lot of the tasks that may be mundane and underappreciated and might be able to help them, particularly, in our world, the sort of people that sit in the offices and that. And I think it actually is being used reasonably broadly. Is that showing up in the productivity line of the national accounts though? No.
All the profits of those companies?
No, right? And at some stage, the mindset is going to completely flick from invest to where are the returns?
Yep, totally.
Okay. And when that happens, I think we're going to be in for a rude shock and market's going to jump around and all that sort of stuff. And we're going to have a really realistic conversation saying, these $500 billion of capex a year or whatever that the hyperscalers are spending on data centers, is it worth it? Meanwhile, James, though, Martin Conlon would say invest in the real world, right? Look at BHP.
Yeah.
But what do you think BHP is doing? Priority number one for them, as shown by its bid for Anglo, is copper. What fuels copper? Electrification. What fuels electrification? Decarbonisation and automation. What fuels automation? AI.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So like it or not, I think AI put itself into the centre of so much, right? Even if you try and keep things grounded, keep things in the real world, you're coming back to AI and you can't ignore it. So, we sit around here and talk about it and say there's no benefits yet. But already the capital flows, even from skeptics inadvertently, are going towards what we think the future is, and the future in and around AI.
Yeah.
How do you stop it? As a whole world, we're putting so much on this now that I think it's almost going to be up to us to see it through, because so much investment's going into it. I don't think we're going to, all write it off in 2 years' time.
No.
Write off trillions of dollars of spending. I think we're cementing ourselves to it.
This is the biggest story of our lives, I reckon, Anthony. I think we'll be talking about this for the next 20 years, and that's how long it may take to really embed itself and change societies. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's just good to step back and say, We are all in on this idea, all in on it with faith and hope. I can't remember too many technological revolutions where we've been so all in, where we have to think about giving up the very energy and water that we need to function as a society. We have to think about giving that over to the machines. I mean, the other thing I'd say, Martin Conlon makes the point, all these companies jumped on the cloud computing revolution, which is a lot of what the data centers are about, right? None of that has shown up in their profits either. Whose profits has it shown up in? Google's,
companies.
Amazon's, Microsoft's. So we just got to be careful about who wins from this as well. So it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Okay, James, let's get to our second topic. And I have to start with an apology to none other than Peter Tonner, the chairman of our parent company, Nine Entertainment. He's a regular listener, and he was hoping I might let slip a few of the names of the winners on the AFR's Business Person of the Year awards on last week's pod. And I think I might have left him a bit disappointed, judging by his speech at the event on Wednesday in Sydney. But in all seriousness, James, it was great to see the chairman there for what was a fantastic night where we honoured 6 brilliant business leaders. We had David Harrison, the Chief Executive of property funds management giant Charter Hall, Meg O'Neill, the CEO of energy giant Woodside, Joe Horgan, who co-founded cosmetics business Mecca, Leah Weckett, the CEO of Coles, Dennis Bastis, who runs Australia's biggest pharmaceutical maker DBG, and the winner of the prize, an Australian infrastructure investor based in New York, where he runs a company called Stonepeak, and that's Mike Dorrell. James, it was a terrific list of winners. Tell us a bit about Mike Dorrell, the winner, because he's not a household name in Australian business. It was a bit of a wild card selection from us, but he's a worthy winner.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is one of these great sort of risk-taker stories that we love at the Fin Review. He used to work at Macquarie as a young guy, decided he wanted to go on a bit of an adventure. He landed in New York a week after the September 11 terrorist attacks in 2001. And the big business that Macquarie had going over there was infrastructure investing. So Mike Dorrell learned his craft in that business, doing everything from, running the models to trying to sell deals as what sounds like a pretty inexperienced cub banker. Eventually, in about 2006, he decides he's going to have a crack on his own, takes one of his colleagues and goes to Blackstone, one of the other big private capital giants in New York, and has a crack at starting an infrastructure investment business there. Unfortunately, it's the GFC, never gets off the ground, fails to raise any money. So he then decides to have a crack again, go out on his own and form Stonepeak. And then 14 years later, this business manages, I think, $80 billion US, Anthony, of infrastructure investments around the world, energy, power, transport and logistics, lots of digital infrastructure as you'd expect. And Mike Dorrell sits on top of this. He's rocketed into the rich list this year with a fortune of $14 billion. It was the biggest debut by a rich list member ever. So impressive. And look, we chatted to him on Monday night. He's a pretty down-to-earth guy. We asked what his big bit of advice was or the big secret to his success, and he just said, keep turning up, keep moving forward, and treat life as an adventure. It was quite a refreshing sort of take on life, wasn't it, Anthony?
Oh, yeah. It's a great reminder, James, these billionaires, they're often just like, you're right. Like, he's so proud that his dad was a teacher at Port Hacking High in the Sutherland Shire. Yeah. He's so proud that most of his childhood was spent down at Griffith in the New South Wales Riverina. He, still goes for the Cronulla Sharks NRL team, donated money to them. He's taken sort of the Macquarie model. He's having a crack on the world stage, and I think it was a reward for effort, persistence, flying the flag for Australia, and just having a red-hot crack.
Yeah, absolutely. Anthony, the best part of these nights is hearing from the winners. We were lucky to have 3 in the room. Now, Dennis Bastis, again, probably not a household name, but what a story. This guy grew up in Melbourne wanting to design cars, eventually got into business, and then eventually got into pharmaceuticals and health and beauty products too. In August, he sold 25% of his business to a US investor, and suddenly that company is worth $7 billion, almost from nowhere.
Wow.
Here's a bit of what Dennis had to say on the night.
It's an incredible honour to be up here, and I thank the AFR for the generous recognition. I don't know that I'd be doing anything else with my life, but the success is mostly about hard work. But I have to mention that I had one bit of incredible great fortune 59 years ago, and that was to be born in Australia. This is one of the few places in the world where it doesn't matter who you know, how much money you have before you get started, but hard work, commitment, and we have a capital structure and people who are willing to give and create chances and opportunities.
Cracking story, isn't it, Anthony? And great point he made about how lucky we are to be Australians.
100%. He brings everything back to just being lucky enough to be born in Australia. These children of immigrants, they really drive home that it is a lucky country, and we all are lucky to be here.
Yeah, well said.
James, you cannot help but be impressed by Leah Weckert, the CEO of Coles. She's had a torrid couple of years dealing with those accusations of price gouging, but she's kept the business on track and she's absolutely smashed her competitor, Woolworths. What I found really interesting is that she effectively says she's running two businesses. Let's have a listen.
And we're very, very focused on what we think is the 1%ers, which is just how do we get out of bed every day and be 1% better than we were yesterday. Yep. And if you start to add those 1%ers up across the course of a year, at the end of the year, you're substantially better than where you were at the start. And I actually think that's quite hard to replicate. Like, you can't just wake up and suddenly your availability is a lot better or your price position is a lot better, because it actually does take chipping away at it constantly to bring it together. And I think this year has been the result of long, but also decisions we've made sort of 2 years ago, of a lot of things that we kind of put irons in the fire because the business wasn't performing as well, that have really come to fruition at once.
James, I think Leah's award, it was steady investment and performance, right? Like, it's a sort of company that makes you stop and go, hang on, the problem with public markets isn't necessarily, that private valuations are higher and all that sort of stuff. If you have a well-managed business in Australian public markets like Coles, the valuation can go up, it can make money for shareholders. It's actually a performance thing, right? And well-performing companies, they actually are appreciated by investors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all should appreciate the sort of complex puzzle that goes in behind the scenes to get, that grocery item on the grocery shelf on when we go down the supermarket. It was also great to honour David Harrison on Wednesday night. These awards are for pioneers, builders, leaders and stirrers. And Harro, as he's known to the property sector, is all of these. He's been running Charter Hall for 21 years and he has that long-term view of the world that, occasionally can be missing. He's seen what, markets can throw at you, and he hasn't lost his nerve. But he did come with a bit of a message for us.
We need to get back on the path of GDP growth per capita instead of going backwards. And I think, all levels of society, both the mum and dads, the politicians, the bureaucrats and business need to understand we've got a bit of a privilege in Australia, but we can blow it up.
It goes back a little bit, Anthony, to that discussion at the top about the Australian Ponzi scheme and needing to build a sustainable economy, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Now, Harro was actually really thoughtful about leadership as well, James. I didn't necessarily expect that. Like, he's the commercial property kingpin. He's the head of the, the agents, the investors, the bankers, all this big end of property. But he also spoke really eloquently about leadership. And, in his mind, that fish really does rot from the head, and he sees his role as leadership. And I thought it was really refreshing to hear a leader just so simply say that, you don't have to be the best transactions person in the property firm. You don't have to be the best close to the agents or whatever. His job is leadership. And that's what he sort of accounts a lot of Charter Hall's success to, just focusing so much on leadership and being a good leader.
Yeah, that did come across from all of the award winners that, there is something to be said for recognising that you're a bit of a role model and living up to that. And I think that's the good thing about the people we honoured on Wednesday night. They all do, not just think of themselves, they think a bit about what's good for the country and what matters in business and in life. So congratulations to all of them.
And they're also good at making a buck, James.
Yeah, they are very good at making a buck. That helps too, yeah, fair point. All right, Anthony, speaking of bucks, we're going to come back after the break and talk about the biggest week for monetary policy of the year. Back in a sec.
A new true crime podcast you need to hear to believe.
I need police right now. I'm just stabbed and broken into my house.
2 men dead at the hands of a teenager and almost every moment recorded.
Please, don't move.
Put the knife down.
I was just trying to help her.
What happened at Alva Beach was as horrific as it was baffling.
There's so much contradiction. We should know more than we know.
I'm Adam Hegarty. I'll take you inside one of the country's most confusing investigations in this exclusive 60 Minutes podcast.
Ambulance, police, inquest, a domino effect of failures. It's killing us.
I'm not a police officer anymore. I can speak more freely.
Alva Beach, Death at the Door, wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. If you want to know more about what we're talking about today and a whole lot more, AFR subscribers can sign up to the Chanticleer newsletter at join.afr.com/Chanticleer. Every Saturday morning, the newsletter pulls together the best Chanticleer columns from the week and delivers them straight to your inbox. And next week's columns are going to be very exciting, Anthony. Geez, it's a big week. Tuesday. Now, I think we all know what the RBA is going to do. Mm-hmm. They're going to hold rates. But, Anthony, what is going to be fascinating here is how Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock explains all this. How's she going to talk to the big turnaround in the RBA's positioning in the last 3 months?
It's been a huge turnaround, James. It's amazing. You look at the market expectations now and they're basically saying 3.6 forever. You know, like we've watched this year, it's sort of the expectations over the next 18 months have gone from, 5 cuts to 4 cuts to 3 to 2 to maybe 1. And now it's kind of saying flat. Like it's amazing how it's changed.
Yeah, but with a hike priced in by the end of next year though. So it's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's just flipped on its head.
Yeah, so let's see how Michelle explains that. And then on Thursday morning, very early, we'll turn to Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve in America. Now, he's almost certain to cut rates. Mm-hmm. He's going to cut rates with house prices at all-time highs, with the stock market at all-time highs. This is going to be interesting to watch, Anthony. Trump wants rates to come down. There are some signs the US economy is weakening, but investors are cheering for a rate cut, please.
They sure are. Imagine if one wasn't delivered next week, James.
Whoa. Trump might storm the Federal Reserve, I reckon.
Yeah.
And then on Thursday, later that day, Westpac has its AGM. The big 4 banks get their AGMs in very late in the year. I think this one will go off fairly smoothly. The ANZ AGM is going to be the one to watch, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think, obviously Anthony Miller's taken over at Westpac. He's almost a year into the job, I think, now, and he's trying to keep it going in the right direction. So it should be reasonably bland.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, we love questions here at the Chanticleer podcast. This week, our question's from Dion in Queensland. If you've got a question you want to send in, you can email us at chanticleer@afr.com. You can also send us a question in audio form. Just record a voice memo on your phone. Include your name and where you're from and email it to us. And, of course, the widget on all our Chanticleer articles at afr.com is another way you can send us a question. So Dion asks, it's great to see gas peaking plants entering the Queensland market to firm the abundance of renewables. If more gas generation is required in other states as well, why aren't those state governments or the federal government providing co-funding to private companies to develop gas peaking plants, just like they are with solar, wind and grid-scale batteries? Interesting question, Anthony, and Dion's referring to a new deal for a new gas peaking plant in Queensland. I think 400 megawatts. Everything's 400 megawatts these days.
Sure is.
Tell us a little bit about that deal and is Dion right? Should the governments do more around gas peakers?
Yeah, so the one we saw this week, James, called Brigalow, co-located on a site in Queensland where there's already a coal-fired power plant. Like you said, 400 megawatts, the magic number. APA Group, which is listed on the ASX, a gas pipelines company, at its core. It's also doing the pipelines there, but it's going to build it. CS Energy, which is one of the big state-owned energy generators in Queensland, it's basically the customer and also going to own a stake in it. They reckon it could be up and running in 3 years, which is only possible because CS Energy saw this coming a while ago and pre-ordered the turbines. So they're apparently already in the order book. So yeah, I think it's the first big gas peaking plant in Queensland for more than 10 years. The reason it's possible is because the government in Queensland has made it pretty clear it wants to build more than 2 gigawatts of gas peaker plants in the next decade or so, James, to firm up the grid. Now, that was kind of out of step with what other governments have been saying. It was quite firm. And the reason for that, Dion, it's the G word, gas. As much as the attitudes towards gas have changed in the past 18 months or 2 years, and I think there's recognition we need it to firm up the grid and the transition, governments still don't love coming out and talking about it. They don't want to be throwing money behind it because it's a fossil fuel. You burn it, releases carbon, contributes to climate change. That's a cold, hard political reality. So, Queensland's more forward in its approach than the other states. But I think as the grid starts to wobble even more, we will see that change. What do you think, James?
If we have even the sniff of blackouts, gas peakers, governments will be throwing everything at everything to try and get more energy built, and gas peakers will be part of that. So hopefully it doesn't come to that. But yeah, I think it's clear that these gas peaking plants are going to be part of the mix, and I think we'll see more of them built, perhaps not with government co-funding, but with broad government support, I reckon. It's a very tricky one politically, though, that's for sure. All right, Anthony, can't wait to be back on the pod next week to talk about all these big interest rate moves. Huge week for markets and monetary policy.
Sure is, James. And just a quick thanks to all the listeners that sent in their Spotify Wrapped this week. There were lots of jokes and jostling to be Chanticleer podcast listener number 1 and try and knock Mac Common off that mantle. So, yeah, thanks to everyone for the support. Separately, it was good to hear you on The Fin, our sister podcast this week, talking about AI.
Yeah, it was a great chat. Thanks for listening this week and all year, and we'll talk to you next week. If you like the podcast and you want to hear more, consider sharing or giving the podcast a review, as it helps other listeners find us. And don't forget to follow wherever you get your podcasts. At The Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. For more, go to afr.com, and you can subscribe to The Financial Review, the daily habit of successful people, at afr.com/subscribe. Chanticleer was hosted by me, James Thomson, and Anthony Macdonald, and it was produced by Mandy Coolin and Alex Gow. Our theme is by Alex Gow. Head of Premium Content is Fiona Buffini.
The Australian Financial Review.
A new true crime podcast you need to hear to believe.
I need police right now. I'm just stabbed and broken in my house.
2 men dead at the hands of a teenager, and almost every moment recorded.
Please, don't move.
Put the knife down.
I was just trying to help her.
What happened at Alba Beach was as horrific as it was baffling.
There's so much contradiction. We should know more than we know.
I'm Adam Hegarty. I'll take you inside one of the country's most confusing investigations in this exclusive 60 Minutes podcast.
Ambulance, police, inquest, a domino effect of failures. It's killing us.
I'm not a police officer anymore. I can speak more freely.
Alba Beach, Death at the Door, wherever you get your podcasts.